Hi, everyone, for the grand finale for 2025. So happy to see all of you here. And if you're watching the recording, welcome to. This show actually is on the last Wednesday, but since this are the holidays and also I'm going to be taking a trip, I'm really excited today to have two exceptional guests like we always have. The show basically the mission is to elevate analyst relations and the technology analyst community. Wanted to give more visibility to the community. So I took over about 6 months ago. I'm Shashi Bellamkonda. My day job is I am a principal research director at the Infotech Research Group. Of course, this is whatever opinions expressed are not uh, related to my employer. So, announcing today's guests. The first guest today we'll have is Anoushka Khanna, and she comes to us as head of AR at Celonis. She's been through a lot of different experiences that I'm looking forward to her sharing with us. She started at Forrester. I'm going to let her introduce herself too. But she's been a journalist and she moved to the US from Europe. So that's another very interesting thing that I'm very keen on. And then we have Blair Pleasant, who is the president and principal analyst of COMMfusion LLC. Really follow her a lot for some of her, thought leadership and coverage content on contact center, customer experience, unified communication, and everything else. To the audience, feel free to comment and we will answer your questions. We want this to be very participative, very casual, and feel free to agree, disagree, or ask questions. With that, ladies and gentlemen, here's Anoushka Khanna. Hi, Anoushka. How are
Hello.
you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for inviting me, Shashi. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, it's really great. Though I love these serendipitous connections, how it all comes together. And I think just to give you a background of how we connected is like I have been helped in my career through a lot of serendipitous connections. So whenever, and especially AR, I'm really interested. So that's how I connected. And then voila, you're in the Washington DC area. So that's really great. So tell the audience a little bit about how you think of yourself. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So, I graduated a very long time ago now, but I graduated in journalism. So my ambition was always to one day, be on TV, reporting the news. That was sort of my passion, and I was able to do that for some time. As soon as I graduated from university, I got a kickstart in the career and started interning. I would work with different various magazine publications, and I did use my journalism skills for a few years. But then I was tapped to join at the time, which was the analyst firm Forrester, to join their advisory team. Now, I had no prior knowledge of the world of the analysts, what type of research they're doing. And even Forrester, I heard of it, but I'd never really understood, okay, what would I be doing in an advisory team? And I was effectively supporting analysts with the delivery of their speaking engagements, their advisory days, helping clients develop an AR strategy. So I was able to witness, what the life of an analyst looks like, but also the connection between analysts and how they're helping organizations, curate and strengthen their product strategy, their go-to-market strategy. And I was fortunate enough to work with Forrester for a decade. And it was probably, I'd say, the most transformational period in my life when it comes to professional growth and development. And then through Forrester, I was able to work with clients in Asia. I served the European market, but I also had vendor clients in North America. So I really got a bit of a lens into global partnerships and how you work with different industries in different markets. It was great. And then through that, I then decided to switch and move away from analysts on the analyst side and move to the client side. And so now I'm with Celonis, and they're headquartered in Munich, in Germany. And I am now working with analysts, but now as a client. So I'm finding this experience, really, interesting for me, because I'm on the journey of getting a really holistic view of the value that analyst relations bring to organizations, but also the nuances of really having to understand how the brain of an analyst works, and also how you relay a strategy to a team that probably don't engage with analysts very often and need a bit of education on how this is done. And I'm no expert, I'm still learning, but I'm finding this experience really exciting. And I've been very fortunate that I did move to Washington, DC this year. I left London, which has been my home for 37 years, and I'm now setting home in Washington, DC, which is also another journey that I'm on personally and professionally. So I'm very grateful for the connection, Shashi, and I'm always open to using LinkedIn and a platform to really get to know other professionals in the industry. So this has been really helpful and very valuable for me.
Great. Let's say hello to Carter Losher. I mean, if there's anything that I've learned, Carter is a great person to follow. His blog is also really good. He talks a lot, having been on both sides, analyst relations. He was also a former guest. So hello, Carter. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I am an avid Carter follower as well. So hello.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, let's dig in a little bit more into your story. Not everybody has the experience, and it's starting to grow because companies are becoming more and more global. Mm-hmm. So how did you deal with the nuances of different ways, time zones across, and maybe cultures too? Tell us a little bit more, Anoushka.
I mean, I think the word that comes to mind when I think about managing, global time zones and working with different cultures, it's agile. As a person, it's really important to have that agility. But also there is empathy, because I mean, again, I can only speak from my experience and my opinion, but I would say that when it came to analysts and analyst relations in different parts of the world, I always found that in North America, so if we look at this by sort of continents, but in North America, there's always this celebrity factor to the analysts, when they're on stage and they're doing the keynotes or doing tweet jams and videos. And this was always like very popular, I would say, product offering. The analysts would go in with, well, let's do a video, or let's do a roundtable speaking event. And this was something very comfortable with clients in North America as well. It was promoted. And so I had a lot of fun working with my clients and vendors in the States. And then when I compare it a little bit to, say, Asia, I found the approach to analysts was a little bit more like a consultancy style, because when you think about the market, that market is evolving so rapidly, and there's such a quick pace, and it's a lot of change happening very fast. Analysts have to be like a bit of a consulting partner and ready to adapt and shift and change, doing a lot of sort of research in emerging markets. You've got to really be a bit of an all-rounder, and so I found that approach was different. Analysts would be called to join a session which is going through roadmap and strategy, which analysts do, but there was more of that, I found, when I was working with my Asian clients. And then in Europe, I feel there's maybe a little bit more of a conservative approach, where we are not going to show analysts everything until it's ready, until it's perfect. And we're not going to necessarily want to show that vulnerability early on. We want to build the trust first. We want to have that more, step-by-step conservative style. So for me, I found this interesting, because here I am project managing a number of different projects around the world, and I having to shift my behavior according to the style of that particular vendor's approach or that particular analyst. And that's quite an interesting thing, because I feel like that has allowed me to really build compassion, empathy, and understanding for speaking the language for the markets you serve, but also, the people you're working with. That's a really important soft skill, you could say, but that's really helped me in my career.
Very nice. Yeah, I've never heard that perspective, but I would tend to think that does exist. I think I actually recently wrote a LinkedIn post. It's more of it's about like the value that analysts bring and how analyst relations bridges the gap. So I think this is more of a casual conversation. So we just want the community to understand everybody's experience. So what's your experience been on how people are proving value of analyst relations within companies?
I mean, it's one of those things where it's very difficult. I mean, when you talk about sort of analyst relations and measuring ROI, for example, that's always a question that comes up, or it's always a topic of discussion, like where's the ROI in analyst relations? And I've always been a firm believer that analyst relations never really owns the R in ROI, right? It's very difficult to prove that, and it can be a difficult sort of strategy to execute on. But where you can sort of bring AR to the table is when you speak about the value. And for me, it's really important to be connected to projects and teams that you can generate and sort of prove value on. And the way to do that is sometimes just creating a measurement system. So one of the things that I was, tasked to do very early on is being able to connect, analyst relations to value. And how you do that is creating some sort of dedicated measurement program to be able to sort of look at the KPIs against all your AR related assets or AR related projects. I mean, it's easy to say, okay, we're going to be leaders in Magic Quadrants, waves, all of these assessments. But beyond that, is there value you can be creating internally, within the organization? One classic example is using analyst relations to break down organizational silos. Okay. I think that is a tremendously valuable tool that, most AR professionals will agree with me on, has helped them elevate their brand, but also elevate the role of analyst relations inside the company and not just focusing on the external assets.
That's in a way like in some of the previous shows, the measurement aspect that you said, right? Like you don't always hear about people referring to say like, hey, I was talking to an analyst and they referred. And when I was talking about my hypothesis about analyst relations and how the market values it, like I studied all the companies that went IPO, and they all seem to have a very robust analyst relations program. On the flip side, there isn't a measurement beyond, how many briefings did you have, or are you on the quadrant and things like that. But the ideas that I've heard through these, talking headless shows, some of them are actually mining their data for sales calls and customer success calls for those words. Anything you have seen in the market?
I mean, I always look at it as Forrester had a very great concept about this, but it was learn versus earn. And so you would always look at how are you using AR to learn, and also then looking at the earning potential. And I think for me, it's more a case of sometimes some of the biggest challenges can be solved when you are simply talking to each other. And this is what brings me back to the topic of the silos. In many organizations, you've got teams that are functioning independently and trying to get to a certain goal or a specific outcome, and potentially hitting a roadblock or a barrier. But if they simply just step back and have the opportunity to take that moment and look at the longer term view or speaking to each other. I think that's where the analyst relations role is super important, because we have that ability to see the forest for the trees, and we're able to take that step back and be an independent, neutral voice. And that's where the analysts come in, because they are there to look at things, from the top and be able to point out gaps, inefficiencies, things that you may not be able to see because you're so focused on working within your teams. So for me, that value in itself can be priceless. And if it's done well and executed correctly with the right communication, I think it can be very successful to elevate your brand, your product, your messaging to the next level with the support of that external help. And I think that's where vulnerability, I mentioned that earlier, is also a factor, because at times, you have to remember, analysts are people. And they're not there to simply just, look at the stats and the figures and everything. I think it's not sometimes for you to be able to show that human side of what you're working on, and for analysts to really understand and feel that journey that a customer is on. And when they feel part of that journey, they're 100% more invested. And that really makes a difference also to your engagement levels, which then helps you with, delivering value and being able to showcase that measurement piece as well.
So I'm going to ask you a question that we haven't discussed at all. Mm-hmm. First, we've discussed this, your career pathway, like you changed from a journalist to joining a analyst firm and then coming to analyst relations. Like, if somebody were to think about it, what kind of skills they should have, and what would you recommend, like if you were to inspire people to join analyst relations? That was one. The surprise question I'll ask you after you answer this.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, there's a blueprint that you should follow. But ultimately, I have always found the strongest skill one can have is communication, and that's in journalism, that's even in the role I do now. But it's really, the ability to listen. And as a journalist, I would say that is crucial. You need to be able to listen, but in your brain, you're formulating a story. And sometimes I think about that in AR. We are storytellers. And that's where the power of storytelling comes into play, because we are telling a story to the market. So in terms of skills, it would be listening. It's being curious. That's one thing that I would always encourage somebody who's thinking about analyst relations or looking into getting a foot in the door. Be curious. And I know that from personal experiences in roles I've had where I've been out of my depth, and I haven't necessarily understood, the product fully, or I don't have technical, background, and I feel like I'm, not quite, fitting in. I would be curious. I would ask the questions that many are afraid to ask, sometimes pointing out the elephant in the room, because those are the things that, are going to take you forward in terms of, if you're going to enter a career in AR, you have to be bold. And you have to be able to ask the questions, storytell, and yeah, I would say, written communication, speaking skills, these are all part of the role. But it's definitely a role that I feel that involves personality in the sense that you need to have an opinion, and you should have an opinion. I don't think it's one of these roles where being vanilla necessarily works. I do think to stand out, it is important to be able to be curious and I'd say passion as well. So I don't know if that answers the question, but these are the things that have helped me, or at least I've seen really come into play as I've navigated my career.
Yeah, I hope we get some bouquets and brickbats to some of these answers from the audience. Hey, people who are listening, please feel free to add your comments or questions. So the surprise question is, you've moved countries. What if somebody wants to move to Europe in AR? Because I see a lot of jobs opening up there. What advice do you have?
If somebody was to move to Europe, I mean, it's very much a hub right now in terms of, the startup world, and being knowledgeable in your field is it matters, so if you are interested in the AI space, or you're looking to move, to work somewhere, cybersecurity, you've got to come with the knowledge, right? The charm and the personality will get you so far, but you really have to be knowledgeable in the world that you're entering. I would say, read the research that's available. There's so much good content that's being put out right now. Don't solely rely on AI tools, but do the homework, read the research, and really get to know your field. And then there are plenty of events, industry events that happen. I mean, in London, there would be one every week. Just go, see if you can attend and go and network and really just get to feel the environment that you're going to be in. That's going to be your world. So I would just say, firstly, there's plenty of opportunities in Europe. I loved working in Europe, and I do miss it. But also there is a space for those that are wanting to really learn and become experts in their field. And there's so many different support and communities that you can join, groups to really understand, what the next decade of your life might be looking like. You might get a bit of, bad weather in London, maybe rainy weather. I don't know. You have to get used to that. But other than that, I think there's a plethora of support resources, places to learn, courses that you can enroll in, content that you can get now online. I would encourage it 1,000%. And those would be sort of my tips if anyone was considering making a move from the US to Europe and pursuing a career in analyst relations.
No, very helpful tips. Another thing, like as you've worked, technology has changed a lot. There are some new trends now. AI is coming in. How do you see this affecting the analyst relations space?
Yeah. I mean, that's like a topic that is circling around us, every day at the moment. And my view on this is, the emergence of AI, it is helping us become more efficient. We are now starting to streamline certain arduous activities that took a lot of time. So we're becoming more efficient in how we're executing on our work. I agree with all of those things. And even for me, I'm on a learning journey now to understand how I can elevate my own performance and ultimately allow myself to be more productive. I will say, we're currently in like an intelligent super cycle. That's how I refer to it. We had digital, before, where there was the whole digital takeover. Now we're entering this, era or environment of intelligence. So it's really about being able to adapt, learn, and evolve with this cycle. But I do worry that, with AI, we may lose that connection. And that's really important, because I feel like in the sort of the world we live in now, it's more about instant gratification. And so we think of what we need, and AI give us the result. It's no longer about give us the tools to get what we need. We just want the results, so it's an instant gratification. And that will impact, the analyst world, because we are used to providing those, even analysts, we give you the frameworks, we're going to give you the tools to, get you to the next level. But now it's this instant need for the result. Just give me the result. And I think that's a slight worry, because we might be losing that connection piece. And that's super critical for value as well. So I would say work with the tools, let it help you do your job more effectively, but don't lose that connection, because that's key. And yeah, I do worry about that sometimes, and I'm trying to figure this out myself as we navigate in a world where AI is becoming my companion in my day-to-day job.
Very nice. We have a nice comment from Tony Keskian. He is part of 180 Ops, very good friend and supporter, I would say, there in the revenue intelligence space. So his approach is like global learning, and the local empirical learning has served him well. Thank you, Tony, for being here and for seeing this. Anoushka, how do people connect with you?
How do they connect with me? I mean, I'm available on LinkedIn. Love to connect there. I'm definitely in a journey myself right now where I live in Washington, D.C., but I'm in that DMV area. So I really want to meet with people that are in the analyst relations world or not, just sort of to learn a little bit more, from people. And I'm currently in that journey myself. But yeah, LinkedIn, email, you can connect with me quite easily.
Sure. No, this was fantastic. So don't go away. I'm going to bring in our next very exciting guest, Blair, but we'll try to have both of you on at the end of the show, and maybe you can answer some questions from the audience as they come up too. Thank you very much, Anoushka, and we'll see you again in a bit.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. I consider myself very new to the analyst relation space, even though people will say, but Shashi, you've been with Infotech for 3 years. I mean, I'm a lifelong learner, as you can see. And the person that I'm learning a lot, having met her at several events together, Blair Pleasant, analyst extraordinaire, co-founder of BC Strategies. She's the president and principal analyst of COMMfusion. OG with a lot of experience, I think 30 years, and especially in the space of contact center, customer experience, unified communications. But why don't I bring Blair up and have her introduce herself rather than try to do it myself? Ladies and gentlemen, Blair Pleasant. How are you doing, Blair?
Good. I love that intro. Thank you.
No,
good to
that's
see
good.
you.
No, thank you so much for this. And we have one of my colleagues from Infotech here who's listening in, and just like Anoushka is also from UK, and you might have run across him also because he covers a very similar space too. But for our audience, why don't you introduce yourself and do a better job than me?
No, you did a great job. So I'm an independent analyst, and I've been doing this for, as you said, over 30 years. So my company is COMMfusion. That's me as an independent analyst. And then I'm also one of the co-founders of BC Strategies, or Business Communication Strategies, which used to be Unified Communication Strategies, or UC Strategies. But then we realized, the way the market was evolving, we needed to expand to include more than just unified communications. So UC Strategies is basically an informal consortium of independent analysts and consultants. And we have a website, we do podcasts, basically trying to educate the market and, either help vendors with their messaging or just provide unbiased, objective information about what's going on out there. So my main areas of coverage are, as you said, CX, contact center, unified communications, and now, of course, AI, because that's, you can't not cover AI. I started at the Yankee Group right out of grad school, and then worked for the Playaz group for a little while, and then became independent and working from home before it was the cool thing to do and before everyone started working from home.
So what attracted you to becoming an analyst, and how was the journey? What were the decision points you decided, hey, this is my pathway?
Yeah, it never happened like that. I never set out to be an analyst, but in grad school, I was focused on market research and communications. So it was just a natural fit when I saw this opening at the Yankee Group. It was like, okay, market research and communications, these are, and writing, and those are the things that I was most interested in. So it was really just a natural fit. And I thought it was just going to be just a short-term thing that I would do, for a little while until I went into a different career. But, here I am, so many years later. And it's just been absolutely, wonderful. We have a hashtag sometimes that we use, analyst life. We get to go on great trips and, meet fabulous people, and we're constantly learning. That's what I love about it. Things change all the time. And right when I think something is getting boring and it's like, okay, what am I going to write about? We've been doing this for a while, boom, there's something else, whether, it was the cloud or now AI, things are always changing. So we're always learning. And that's what I really love about it.
Very nice. Good perspective. I have to check out that hashtag. I think that was a well secret, I think, analyst
Yeah, we don't
life.
use it too often, but sometimes, when we go to events and, we get to brag about what we're doing, or, it's like, analyst life.
No, that's true. That's fantastic. Tell me a little bit about what are some best practices you've seen in companies that practice analyst relations very well. So,
Yeah, I don't think it's a secret, but the main thing is open communications. Let us know when something important is happening, because we're going to get inquiries from either clients or the press or investors. So it's really important that we know ahead of time, if possible, when there's going to be a big announcement or a big change or something, so that we can respond intelligently. So continual communications is important. There are times where a vendor will meet with us at Enterprise Connect or something, and then that's it. And we don't hear from them for another year. So it's really important to have that continual communications and regular briefings. So it doesn't need to be, constant, but, maybe once a quarter, just update us about what's going on, have a group analyst meeting. It doesn't have to be one-on-one, a group briefing is fine. And leave time for Q&A. Don't save the roadmap for the last 5 minutes. That's really important. And also involve C-level and senior product people and strategy people. It's really important that we know them and that we hear from them, and that they hear from us also. The whole thing with analysts and analyst relations is that it's a two-way street. We're hearing from you, we're hearing from the vendors about their product strategy direction, but they're also getting feedback from us. So listening to that feedback, tying it in with their marketing and product and things like that. So that's really important. And I think also having these top level people understand the value of analysts and what we bring, and making sure that the AR people get the resources that they need. There are so many times where I'll attend an analyst event, and the AR person might say, some of our senior people, were kind of wary about this, but then after the event, they're like, wow, I really get it. Now we see, the value that the analysts provide. So it really is important to get these people involved, so that they get the information and that they see the value. So it's, this continual, I guess the word we're hearing all the time now is flywheel. That seems to be the word of the year. So it's a flywheel with, analysts and AR also. One other thing, I need to put in a plug for independent analysts, because there are some vendor firms that don't really get independent analysts, and they just focus on, the Gartners and the Forresters and, the people who put out, the waves and things like that. But independent analysts have a lot to offer also. We provide value in different ways. We can be more flexible, and there is a lot of value that we offer. So I would say, don't just look at, the 4 big research firms, and also, pay attention to the independent analysts. And there's a lot of us out there.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think the independent analysts have been there for a very long time too. There are a couple of things that I've observed, and I'd like your opinion on this. Number one, I actually wrote a blog post on my personal blog. Either it's late at night or early in the morning, depending on the time zone, which was an observation that's been on my mind for a very long time. Companies that do an IPO have a very robust analyst relations function. And that makes sense to me, because I think there was a time back when social media first came up, like companies that were engaged in social media actually saw their stock value go up. I mean, this is right now just a hypothesis, it's not. So what do you think about that? And before you answer, I also want to add another point from my observation, and I've done a lot of research on staying relevant in AI-powered search. The interesting thing is that analyst content shows up very high for subjects that people are interested in. So there are 2 ways that I think to add to your point about both independent analysts and research is, number one, like, hey, if your company has to grow, it's not just your code, but it's also what other people are talking about you, because some of the investors are going to talk to analysts. The second thing is, like, analyst content is neutral. So if it is the right thing for the topic, it will come up high for AI-powered searches. And do you know Thomas Randall, Blair?
Yeah, and it's funny, Thomas, what you just posted about flywheel is a good word of the year, and also orchestration. I don't know if you saw my LinkedIn post from, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and that's exactly what I wrote, is that the 2 words of the year should be flywheel and orchestration, because I'm hearing them all the time. Then other people chimed in and said, what about agentic AI? And my attitude is, that's just so, it's kind of like, white bread or whatever by now. But yeah, I totally agree. Flywheel and orchestration are the words of the year for 2025.
Great. Thank you, Thomas, for that. So what do you think of these 2 observations?
Yeah, as you said, social media has been around for a long time. And frankly, for independent analysts, it's been very, very important, because that is one way that we get our thoughts and ideas out there. So it's been crucial. A lot of us aren't using Twitter or X as much anymore, which is a shame, because, for a while, I mean, that was how a lot of people got to know me and, hear my ideas. That was how I met, like, Dave Michaels. We met through Twitter. So it really was, very valuable, but, obviously, a lot of us aren't using that anymore, but LinkedIn has just become, crucial. So I think any company that isn't leveraging analysts and, reposting or LinkedIn posts or commenting and, getting active on that is really, really missing the boat, because it's just so important to engage that way. And yeah, as far as IPO, that's an interesting theory. I would be interested in learning more about it. But again, it makes total sense, because you're getting that exposure, and again, it's customers, channel partners, investors. A lot of the analysts we talk to, investors a lot, and a lot of the investment firms, we have regular cadences with them. So it's just really important to be active in those channels and to engage with analysts that way as well.
Very cool. No, I'll have to dig into that a little bit more and do more correlation. Yes, but I definitely know about AI-powered search. The more you're cited by others, that's much better.
And now it's not SEO anymore. It's GEO, Generative Engine Optimization, which I just learned about recently. But that's what we're all going to have to be focusing on now as well.
Yeah, happy to walk you through what I found through that. A lot of members, I take a lot of calls from our Infotech members on that. I was just on a call an hour ago. Question for you. What if people wanted to become technology analysts? Like, I'm still learning 3 years into this, but what are your tips for people who want to join and become a technology analyst?
Well, I don't know. You seem to be a pro at this by now, so it's time to stop saying you're new at this. I think you're official.
Thanks. I'll take that as a badge of honor.
So I think pretty much similar to what Anoushka said. Be inquisitive, be curious, and also be skeptical. I think it's also important not just to take the vendor's word for things, but also probe a little bit. What does this really mean? When they say we're the best at this, well, what do you mean? Everyone else says we're the best at this, or so I think we need to be a little skeptical and just be comfortable asking questions. So that's just really important. I think also, being an analyst is a lot of writing, so it's important to have those writing skills, and don't just rely on AI, because we know that there's a lot of AI slop out there, and so be a good communicator, be a good writer, get used to traveling. We travel a lot, and we don't get a lot of rest at these conferences. A lot of people think it's just fun and we're being wined and dined, and we are, but we're also working really, really hard, keeping late hours, and even if we're at a dinner reception, we're still talking business, we're still asking questions. So yeah, get used to traveling, and I think it's really about forming relationships, whether it's with the vendors, with other analysts, with the channel. It's really all about forming relationships. So, just be personable, and be open to talking with other people and getting to know them, as people, asking questions. So I think that's really important. And it's funny, in the analyst world, even though we all compete with each other, we're all buddies. We talk about, especially in the CX world, we have a tribe. So yeah, forming those relationships is really important. And you've obviously, look at what you're doing. This is absolutely amazing, the way you're forming these relationships with other analysts. So like I said, you're a pro by now.
Thank you. And I think I got a shout out from Tom too. So that's really good. This is very interesting. And I have a question about asking questions, but I have something else on my mind too. Like when companies want to contact you, right? Usually at what stage they are at, and how do they establish a relationship with you? This is somebody who you haven't heard of maybe before.
Yeah, well, first I have to make sure it's not spam, because that's been crazy lately. But usually it's, they've heard me present, or it'll be at a conference where they, hear me speak or something, or they see something I've written. So it might be reaching out to me in a LinkedIn message, where they say, I read your post, or a lot of times it'll be at a conference where either they'll come up to me or they'll send me a note afterwards and say, I heard your presentation and I want to get more information about this, or, talk to you about this. So that's typically how it happens. And then sometimes through BC Strategies, people will reach out that way. So it varies.
Okay, that's good. So the question I wanted to ask you about the interaction is, and I've heard different theories on this, there are some analysts who give feedback right away during the briefing. There are some who will wait and send it to the analyst relations person. What's your opinion? Which side are you on?
Yeah, if it's positive feedback, I'm happy to do that, at the event. Sometimes I feel there's a little too much. I like to do it offline. That's just me personally. Obviously, other analysts have different personalities, and some, will spend time at conferences or briefings giving that feedback. Just my personality, I prefer to do it offline.
Yeah, I think.
But there's no right or wrong.
There's absolutely, I agree with you. I think on the AR side, most AR professionals will prepare their presenters to say like, hey, because you're presenting, it's not going to be one way, it's going to be two ways. But sometimes it's better to send them a thoughtful, like, hey, here's what could be better kind of thing, right? So yeah, you're absolutely right. There's no right way or wrong way.
Or again, if we're at an event, so maybe, over cocktails or something, you can say, here's what I thought and here's what you could have done better or something. So it could be during the event, but maybe, not necessarily while they're presenting.
Yeah, I have a theory on this, which I don't think is going to be very popular, but I would like to know, like, if I was presenting to an analyst, especially on one-to-many, I'd like to know, like, hey, how were my presentation skills? And I think that's very good feedback. I think we all have to keep, there's no way we say like, hey, this is the end. I don't know if anybody asks that question, but I hope they will, because I think the analysts, having seen so many presentations, can actually say like, hey, the slides could have been designed better, or Shashi, don't talk too fast. People may not understand you, any of these things. So I hope we get to give such positive, improving feedback. On that,
constructive criticism.
Constructive criticism, yes. On that note, quickly, like, is there anything that in the analyst and analyst relations, something that you would advise them not to do?
Yeah, sometimes during briefings, they don't necessarily prepare for analysts. They'll use, like their customer briefing or something. So, but analysts ask and industry analysts ask different questions than financial analysts. So it's important to talk to us, being prepared to talk to analysts, knowing what we're going to be asking and what we're going to be interested in. Don't spend 10 minutes talking to us about trends. We know the trends. Don't tell us about what other analysts are saying, or, give us all these quotes about what other analysts are saying or awards that they've won. We don't need the marketing pitch. We need more, either about the technology, the strategy, the direction. So don't use as much marketing speak when you're talking to analysts, because that's not what really we're interested in. So I'd say that's one thing I see some firms doing, or some vendors doing, that, understand, what kinds of things we're interested in, what we're going to be asking about, and be prepared for that. The other thing I'd say is it's important to follow through and follow up. If you tell us you're going to do something, or, send us something, do it so that we don't have to bug you about it. And then leave time for Q&A, whether it's an in-person briefing or an online briefing, whatever. Make sure there's enough time for Q&A, because that's what we do. We ask a lot of questions. So as I mentioned this before, there's so many times we'll be at an event where they leave the roadmap session for the last one, and then it's 10 to 5, and we all have a zillion questions. So it's really important to make sure there's enough Q&A, and that we have enough time to get to what we think is the important stuff. And this is one minor thing, but it comes up a lot. Before you set a date for a briefing or an event, check with some of your friendly analysts to make sure there's nothing else on the calendar, because we get so busy and there's so many competing events. And there are always times where, I feel bad when, I'll get an invitation to, a briefing when it's like, well, we're all, overseas right now at, analyst events, so we're going to miss your briefing. And, I feel bad about that. So I think it's really important to, talk to us, see what's on our calendars before you schedule something, just to make sure that you get the most out of it, because we know it takes a lot of work and effort to do these briefings. So, we want you to get the most out of it too.
That's true. Oh, fantastic. Lots of good information, both for our live audience and for people who are going to see this. Blair, I have a short episode of Marketing While Brown, where I try to introduce something new and cool. And after that, we'll bring back both you and Anoushka together, and maybe you both can ask each other questions. So prepare for that. We'll see you in a bit. The episode was kind of a wish list for me to start a Friday thing on observations that I've seen, especially in the marketing space. But luckily, I think when I was taking over this show, I asked Paul Greenberg, like, hey, can I do a little bit 5-minute thing on this? And he said, yeah, sure, that will be great. I usually try to look for, smaller companies, like if you've seen in the previous episodes, like I think Make Media was .ai was one of them. And we had like Bruce Daly's AI Analyst Copilot as one of them. So I'm looking for recommendations on things that you see that look cool, and we're more than happy to feature them on this segment of Talking Headless. This is very new. I mean, I think Google introduced it just yesterday. It's not out entirely, but I think like Blair and Thomas, everybody said about agentic AI, people don't understand the term and it's being overused. But what Google has introduced here, and I have not yet I'm still on the waiting list, is taking the intelligence from your Gmail and your calendar and your Google Drive and trying to prompt you with things, right? Like sometimes I miss a lot of things that are in my email that I should take action. And I think the current tools of, hey, flag this or bring it up may not do that. So I'm interested in seeing how Google is planning to help us all. The biggest message here is also, like, when you think about agents, this is how far you can expose this to like consumers, right? So that they understand, okay, an agent is going to keep looking at my email and keep giving me answers. So good job on that, Google. But with that, again, like if anybody has any cool tips, please let me know and we will feature them in future episodes. With that, I'm going to bring back Anoushka and Blair. Have you both met each other? Probably not, but
No, we're in very different industries.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you most likely know a lot of the Forrester CX analysts. Yeah. But we haven't interacted, the two of us. I agree with everything Blair was saying. I was nodding away, saying, "Yeah." When it comes to those briefings and the marketing spiel and all the rest, I've lived it. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you're from Forrester. So.
Yeah, that's true. So, Blair, what would you advise somebody who just moves to the US and wants to be part of the community?
Well, get to know us and
follow Analyst life.
Yeah. Well, follow all the analysts certainly, and comment. And Shashi, like that's how we got to know you. You commented so much on all of our posts. So when we met you in person, it's like, this is the person who we've been seeing on LinkedIn so much. So you really set a great example for that. So yeah, definitely, follow all the hashtags and comment and join in the conversations. And again, it's all about relationships, whether it's with the vendors or with other analysts. So don't be afraid to chime in and just join in the conversation.
Yeah,
that's true. Is that your homework, Anoushka?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, since I've moved out here, I've just been really sort of navigating not just DC and moving to the US, but also the professional network. And I'm fortunate that I've got plenty of connections, but I think really putting yourself out there, and as you say, Blair, just commenting, providing your perspective, my viewpoint on something, I think I might be a bit nervous to do that initially, but it could actually then lead to another discussion or a conversation, and then that's how it builds from there. So yeah, it's definitely a New Year resolution for me for 2026 in the new world. I saw a question, something about DC shaping up.
Yeah, you couldn't answer it in the previous episode, so I brought it up. And also after this, Ryan Zook, who is also a very good friend of ours, also made a comment. But maybe you want to.
Yeah.
By the way, Thomas is from the UK, now in Canada.
Okay. Yeah. So we should connect, Thomas. I'm sure we've got plenty of stories we can exchange. For me at the moment, I'm not feeling a huge sort of culture shift in that sense. I find actually DC to be it has a very European look and feel, because there's so many beautiful monuments and the buildings and even the way it's layout and design. And I only just found out when I moved here that the architectural structure of DC as a city was designed off of Paris's architecture, which when I thought about it after, this makes a lot of sense because of the bridges and the structure and the roads and the way, it's designed. So I haven't really felt sort of a huge, culture change. But of course, as with any move internationally, there are certain, habits and things I'm learning, driving on the left-hand side, the tipping culture, and there's things like that, which is going to take some time for me to fully get used to. But on the whole, it's been a really positive experience, and that is something that I'm telling my friends back home. I'm glad I made the move. So I'm just getting used to the cold. That's the only thing. I'm not looking forward to the harsh winters.
Yeah, I've met Blair personally, even though Blair, you're in California, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to, having coffee or something, and maybe have a analyst relations DC meetup sometime in the new year. Okay. I think there are a lot of people here. So Ryan asks us, he likes our always learning perspectives. I think everybody on this show mentioned it one way or the other. Is there a skill or trait from elsewhere in organizations, other roles that you think AR pros should learn better and lean on more, or something they need to unlearn? Anybody want to take that?
Well, I loved what Anoushka said earlier about storytelling. AR people really are, communicating on behalf of their company and, getting the story out. So I really like that idea.
I feel for me, I've had the lens of being in the analyst house and seeing the day-to-day schedules of these analysts. And as Blair mentioned, the travel, it's rigorous sometimes. And the demands that are placed on analysts, the amount of inquiry calls that some of these analysts are sitting on, an MQ or a wave process, it really does take it out of you. And then applying that knowledge to now my role, which is having the empathy. And that's where I think about empathy. It's just having that understanding that, you're going to approach an analyst. This analyst has probably been sat on 5 briefings that day, and you're going to come in now. So how do you just make it stick, and how do you connect? And that speaks to, not just regurgitating an existing presentation or giving, a briefing that's more like a pitch. I think it's about, it's one of those softer skills, but it's really, how do you connect? Because you have to put yourself sometimes in the shoes of the analyst to really understand why they're giving you this feedback, or how this could help improve your messaging, and also just building that relationship where the analyst actually feels understood. A lot of the time it's more about vendors feeling understood by analysts, but sometimes you should flip the script and think, how can we make the analyst feel understood as well? Because that is still, part of their role. So I think that empathy is also key. And I'd say I'm seeing that in play, in my life at the moment.
And I think also, trying to make it fun if possible. Like Ryan is a great example. We'll always talk about Beatles and Paul McCartney because, that's, he knows it's a passion of mine, and, he'll always bring it up. So, we kind of start off on, a light kind of note before we get into the heavy stuff.
Yeah, and this is absolutely, and this is what I was saying about the different regions. I feel there's a different culture in terms of how you approach it. And some of the times it's, I'm not going to talk personal because it's an analyst, or I'm not going to share that because you can't say that in front of an analyst. Yes, you can, because they are still humans at the end of the day, just like you and I. And you can really you can develop that relationship also. And I think that gets missed a lot of the times. It's very much a mission. You've got 30 minutes. Let's just cram everything into the 30 minutes into the analyst's brain and get what we need. But we have to remember, they're doing this all day, every day. So how do you make this fun, and how do you make it just pleasant all round?
That's great perspectives. In fact, when my son and I went on a road trip across, I got a lot of tips from both analyst relations folks and analysts. That was a kind of, very good gesture from everyone else. Like Blair said, it's a very close-knit community. I think there's a lot of support. I think Blair actually introduced me to another company just to say like, hey, Shashi is interested. So there's a lot of, there's less competition. Everybody has a particular viewpoint, and I think it's a nice community to be part of. I want to thank both of you for coming on the show and giving your perspectives. I'm sure the community will appreciate it. I also want to thank Carter, Lusher, Thomas, and Ryan, and everybody else who's joined the live show and people who watch it. So this is really great. By the way, any of you Prince fans?
Prince fan, yeah.
Yeah, if you'll watch the episode with Christine Randall and Brent Leary, I just got reminded when you talked about Beatles and things like that, right? So Ryan, if you're a Prince fan, shout out to you too. But happy holidays, everybody, and we will see you in January. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Happy holiday.
Thank you. Yep, thanks for doing this. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This has been a Playaz Productions Network digital broadcast.